The effect that the Rings of Power had on their wearer depended exclusively on that wearer, and partly their nature. And within Tolkien's writings, that individual's nature was inherently connected to the wider nature of that person's race, according to the designs of Ilúvatar. This is why elves reacted differently from dwarves, who reacted differently from men, who reacted somewhat differently from hobbits to the effects of the Rings of Power. When I say nature, what I truly mean is foundation or predisposition, based on which an individual is more likely to do something, as it comes naturally to them and to their self-interest. The elves, in their immortality, closest connection to God, and knowledge of the natural world, were predisposed to not only detect the malice of Sauron within the 16 Great Rings, but also not falter to the power of the One. After all, the more powerful you are on a spiritual level when it comes to the elves, the less likely you are to be tricked by your own ambition and give in to Sauron's plan. Their immortality, biological reality, and spiritual development accompanied are what made up the elven nature, and likewise their absence are what forged human nature, which of the three races was most susceptible to Sauron. Through the race of men, we get a clear view of both worlds within Tolkien's philosophy. Men, unlike the elves, were mortal, and through Melkor's corruption, had become fearful of Ilúvatar's gift, the gift of exiting the world through death. Whereas elves were defined by their immortality, men were defined by their mortality and fear thereof, which made them predisposed to the opposite result than that of the elves. Therefore, it was within the nature of the race of men, and their offshoot of the hobbits, to be enthralled by the power of the Great Rings. Men yearned power, so much power so as to escape that which they feared most, the unknown, their mortal end. This was the starting point of every member of the race of men. This was their nature, and this is why the rings were so successful in corrupting them, using their own fear against them until ultimately enslaving them to that fear, by allowing them to surpass death, though not in the way that they had expected. Of course, some great men and hobbits were able to overcome their most basic impulses and needs, and were successful in refusing the One, which showcases the capacity of Tolkien's characters to fight through their lesser nature to achieve greatness. Nonetheless, the promise of unlimited power and escape from death had been Sauron's plan when it came to the kingdom of Númenor as well, with similar success, leading to the destruction of the island. With the elves and men, we see two poles, the two opposites when it came to the Rings of Power. This contrast is brought about by spiritual wisdom, which itself was greatly assisted, seemingly, by the status of the person's mortality and everything that it entailed. With that said, it is now finally time to talk about the middle of the poles, the in-between of the natures of elves and men, the race of the dwarves. Though mortal like men, they were not corrupted like them, but to showcase their position in the middle of the other races, while not corrupted, they were affected. In the appendices of the Lord of the Rings, it is said that the only power over them that the rings wielded was to inflame their hearts with the greed of gold and precious things, so that if they lacked them, all other good things seemed profitless, and they were filled with wrath and desire for vengeance on all who deprived them. But they were made from their beginning of a kind to resist most steadfastly any domination. Though they could be slain or broken, they could not be reduced to shadows, enslaved to another will. And for the same reason their lives were not affected by any ring to live either longer or shorter because of it. The dwarves lived longer than men. Their lore and history was deep, and their culture existed with the creation of new and beautiful things at its center, passed from father to son for millennia, all the way to the forging of the dwarven race at the hands of Aule the Smith himself, whose intentions were nothing but pure. Where men feared death, dwarves grew up within a society that did not, at least not to the same extent, even though they were the least certain out of all of the races of what happened following their inevitable end. You partly see this lesser regard or fear for death with their legends regarding the reincarnation or reawakening of Durin the Deathless, the father of the dwarves. The dwarves were made by Aule in this way, hard as stone and resistant to unnatural things such as the rings, which proved to be objects that offered something that the dwarves were simply not interested in. They were not wise enough like the elves to completely reject them, but not foolish enough like men to be utterly consumed by the potential of unlimited power, instead wielding them to do that which they had always done, just better. The rings allowed the great lords of the dwarves to amass hoards of treasure greater than ever before, to dig deeper and more greedily, gather more and more gold, with the beauty that they gathered and created causing a need for even greater beauty. What had made them resistant to corruption and turning to evil, which was their love for crafts, and a close society focused on the gift given by Aule, is what ultimately made them more greedy than ever, with the unfortunate result of their greed attracting the attention of the dragons, who consumed the wealth of the dwarves alongside their rings and great mountain halls. Or for the dwarves of Khazad-dûm, who in their ever-growing search for Mithril, which must have been heightened by their great ring, awoke a Balrog of Morgoth from the depths, Durin's bane. Therefore, we can surmise that for all races, what the rings do is attempt to emphasize the specific natures of each race, and specifically the shortcomings associated with that nature. The men feared death and did everything in their power to attain enough power to overcome it, becoming the perfect victims of Sauron's complete and utter domination. And the dwarves feared the loss, as highlighted before, of their beautiful treasures, whether by theft or by the potential loss of future beauty by not mining and not toiling long and hard enough, thus leading to their doom in a way that Sauron had not intended, but which nonetheless was to his advantage, leaving the dwarven race weakened more than ever before. Nevertheless, because of this aspect of the dwarven people, Sauron was unable to corrupt and dominate them in the manner that he did with the Nazgûl, and the dwarves as a whole, while flawed, would play an instrumental role in the destruction of the One Ring. Other than the assistance of Gimli or the chain of events within the Hobbit that led to the ring landing in the hands of Bilbo, there was another incident. A year before Frodo embarked on his journey, the Dark Lord sent a representative to negotiate with the dwarfs of the Lonely Mountain. With rumors of the One Ring resurfacing, Sauron was headstrong in his search of the ruling ring, and he offered Durin's folk, in exchange for their help in finding the ring, his protection, as well as 3 of the 7 rings originally given to the dwarf lords, alongside a liberated realm of Khazad-dûm. During these talks, he had deliberately hidden the nature of the ring he was searching for, claiming it was nothing but a trinket and certainly not the one. But the king of Durin's folk, Dain II, in his wisdom, sent the messenger on his way and claimed to wish to think about the offer. Immediately, he dispatched Glóin and his son Gimli to Rivendell to inform Lord Elrond of what had transpired, which is the reason why the pair attended the Council of Elrond and why Gimli the dwarf joined the Fellowship of the Ring. Through this incident we can understand, just as it happened with men like Aragorn, how one, through their wisdom and mental strength, can overcome their basic drives and not claim the ring to begin with. Dain, by the point this took place, understood Sauron's true intentions and nature, as well as what he wished to do to his people, and he did not hesitate in his rejection. In my view, this was a combination of personal spiritual development, a better understanding of history and Sauron, as well as dwarven nature by itself. If he had wielded a ring, he would still not have been Sauron's slave, as what Sauron truly offered, beyond his lies and great promises, was not in Dain's predisposition to care for, a positive starting point from which he ultimately made the right choice. A massive thank you to my channel members, and thank you very much for watching.